I certainly say, Madam Speaker, and I think Oregonians will agree with me.
Political bodies exist to secure responsible government and to execute the will of the...
Let's start again.
Welcome back.
Welcome back.
Yes. Here we are.
Hey, thank you, Doge fans, for showing up. Oregon D.O.G.E. discussion on government efficiency, but today
Kind of a behind the scenes look.
it's a behind the scenes,
Update.
the making of the Oregon discussion on government efficiency. And of course, we wanted the three most popular
Based on what?
people on the podcast based upon comments on YouTube are the three of us.
Yes, I'm glad you have
The
some
three of us.
context there. Thank you.
Drazen out.
50% of
Yeah.
statistics are...
Yeah. I know she was Chris
polling? Did we
Leader
get
Drazen
polling?
was on twice and she became the most popular. So I said, other than Drazen, who do you like?
So we got 54 days left in session.
We do.
And we said, hey, why don't we get together and give a little bit of an update, talk about what's happening.
Pull
what's
the veil
going on.
back a little bit, right?
Pull the veil back. Yes. The curtain back. Who is the great Wizard of Oz that's making this system run?
Well,
So hot topic this week.
You know who's in the curtain, by the way, when they pull the curtain back?
Who's there?
SEIU, baby.
you're not wrong.
You're not wrong. Governor Kotek, you shall do the following.
It's our best episode yet. We said behind the curtain, the truth bombs. The truth bombs are coming.
Whoa,
So one of the things that came up this week, we had an article written about the number of placeholder bills that I thought was absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
Wagner, President Wagner had me in his office. He's like, what sucks is when you guys, put forward facts that we can't refute.
Which is true. Which is every day, by the way.
Facts get in the way of a great narrative.
You're not wrong.
So a placeholder bill is a bill that's got a broad relating to clause that can be amended.
Relating to medicine.
Relating to taxation.
Relating to energy.
Relating to public safety.
Relating to transportation.
Yeah.
Exactly. And inside that bill, so they normally are posed as a study.
Right.
Study transportation.
Right.
But at any given moment, a member can come back with an amendment that does anything they want within the framework of that relating to clause.
It can change that study bill from 7 lines to 70 pages.
And they'll do it with 1 hour notice.
That's right.
That's exactly right. So in 2015,
And by they, I mean the majority party, which the voters put in charge of every facet of government. This is the government, the Democratic Party of Oregon. And
And whenever they whine to me about it, I say, heavy is the crown.
heavy is the crown.
how many bills do you think were placeholder bills back in 2015?
52.
72.
37.
Oh, I win that one.
Almost doubled to 70 in 2017. Went up to 110 in 2019. By 2021, we were at 202. Last session, 2023, last long session. The long session is where you get the unlimited
most
bills. Yeah.
Right.
So short sessions were limited to 2 apiece. So you can't have that many placeholder bills. But long session, 2023, 451 placeholder bills. So 451 bills that just said relating to employment, relating to unemployment, relating to paid leave Oregon, relating to
Fahrenheit 451, man.
There you go.
They're going to burn it
And
down.
how many this year?
2025, and this is through April 11th,
Yep.
because we're still counting.
Yep.
Bills are still being introduced. It's, May 7th today? I don't know when we'll put this out, whenever we put it out, but May 7th today, 616 through April 11th that had been.
616.
Over 100 of those were in Senate Judiciary.
Yep.
That's
a lot
more
of it.
laws than contained in the Torah.
Well, and mind you, most of those placeholder bills are being run by Democrats. The majority of them all, because Republicans do not run placeholder bills, because having such a broad relating to clause, the majority party can then just say, you know what? I like relating to transportation. I'm going to go ahead and take that bill, and we're going to pass a transportation tax, and it's
With your name on
with
it.
your name on it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
so I mean that is the absolute fact. This is
Yeah.
a tool of the majority party.
Correct.
It is, and it's the way that they're able to then do amendments in secret without public disclosure.
That's right. And they do a
Without-
post and go.
Post and go, our notice, and suddenly those who are impacted by that bill have very little time to get their, folks in to testify, oppose, whatever, and it's a way in which they just move legislation without transparency. And of course, every time the Democratic caucus in the House and in the Senate meet, a majority of every committee is present.
Correct.
And how that doesn't violate public meeting laws, I don't know. I've raised it with legislative counsel many times, and legislative counsel always goes, well, I suppose, and I mean, it's just a nothing burger response. And first of all, as a lawyer, nothing burger responses are tools of the trade. So, but nevertheless, we have a statute called public meetings laws.
Right.
And every time they caucus, this is the thing, and they talk about bills. A majority of every committee is there talking about bills. They're working out what they're going to do on gut and stuffs or on these study bills to amend it, completely change it. And they're doing it behind closed doors.
When we were in Arizona, if I remember correctly, one of the things that we learned, a meeting with some of the legislators over there, is their caucuses are open to the public. And literally, their caucuses are broadcast.
My gosh, I'm not sure I'd be up for that.
Me neither.
Depending on who's in the caucus, we've had similar situations with members live tweeting.
This is true.
Well,
okay,
as
we
a
want to keep
former
this
Republican
secret.
leader, I can tell you that did happen.
Yes, and then suddenly Nigel Jaquist is calling up Leader
Yeah.
Bonham or Leader McLane. So I hear you're going to do...
I'm not going to identify the members that member that I thought did that. But I will say, though, when you're the majority party, you have a majority in your caucus of every single committee in the Senate. Now, not necessarily the joint committees. Same with the House. And how that, whether the Legislative Council issues an opinion that violates public meeting laws, why the citizens of Oregon aren't enraged, I don't know. I've told people about it, and every time I tell it, people just they can't do that.
Yeah.
They can't do that. And I'm saying they're doing it
Every day.
every time they meet in a caucus, which is every day before the floor session.
That is correct.
So for an hour a day,
Yep.
they violate.
They
public
go
meeting law.
over bills. They're going to, and how many times have you heard a Democratic member of the Senate, because we're all in the Senate, but I'm sure it applies in the House when they say, well, we're going to work that out in caucus, or we're going to caucus that bill and decide what to do.
That's right.
And I'm like, oh, you mean behind closed doors without any scrutiny or any transparency to the public? You're going to figure out what you're going to do and then come into a committee and just move forward.
I will say in some cases, though, with respect to the gut and stuff, it's a single member. A single member has drafted a bill. They drop the amendment. They are moving this forward.
I don't disagree with you, but I think what Michael's saying is that they already have the opportunity in caucus to discuss what that amendment's going to be with every one of them before they even decide to submit it to committee an hour and 1 minute before the committee hearing on the bill. Or it doesn't even have to be before the committee hearing. They have gotten stuffed bills with amendments and brought amendments through an hour before the work session.
Right.
So that they can literally make law prior to the work session and not really allow any public comment whatsoever at all.
How's that? Is that, standing by democracy?
So what's funny, this is the example that's in this article, Senate Bill 469, a bare bones parole study bill that then amended, turned into a streamlining of the parole policies. Like, pretty expansive bill. Oregon Justice Resource Center, nonprofit focus on criminal justice issues. There's an OPB article. I should give them credit since I'm reading it. Came out and said, "Where'd this come from?" Senator Thatcher hey, wait a second. There's been no conversation about this at all in 2025, and now we're going to post this amendment as if we're going to vote on it. And the lobbyist, comes out and says the same thing. Enough pressure is put on the chair of the committee, and of course,
would that be Chair Floyd Posanski out of Eugene?
It would be. It would be.
I'm surprised he let those individuals ask the question, considering what he did to a colleague over there.
And we could go into that
Do we
again.
want to relitigate that on the behind the scenes?
How
podcast?
could I be shut down when I'm asking a relevant question in committee?
It wasn't
Aghast.
It wasn't, according to him, it wasn't germane, or it was too broad, or both, or.
I think he said we're not getting into that
Because it's too political.
because it's too political.
Oh,
Right. What
'Cause
did the governor know, and when did she know it?
Yeah.
Her or the previous governor?
The Constitution guarantees our right to political speech. I
Indeed.
don't know if he knew.
I don't know, and I can tell you
well, he
the
is an attorney in
legislative
the chair of
branch
judiciary, but
has the absolute duty to hold the executive branch accountable. And when a member of the legislative branch in committee asks a relevant question, to have a Democrat chair shut it down because he doesn't want a Democrat governor embarrassed or whatever is, but again, they have the power to, and until voters in the state of Oregon hold them accountable for that behavior, they will continue to do it.
But so that's what the point of this article is making here. The Oregon Crime Victims Law Center piled on. More people submitted testimony, got a hold of the chair's office and said, hey, this has been a terrible process. We don't support the idea and we don't support the process. So the next day he comes to committee and he says, I don't believe there was enough testimony allowed on this bill and all the parties need to have more thorough discussion, kills his bill and says, it's not my intent to bring something that's not had a public process. I mean, that is something that's important to me. Now this, and I do mean to pick on him, so I don't want to act like I'm not trying to pick on this individual.
The individual being Floyd Posanski,
yeah.
Chair, Judiciary Committee.
Floyd Posanski, Chair Judish, every year that I've been in the building during a long session, he's had a gun bill. Every year the gun bill's been a study bill. And before the deadline, first chamber deadline, the bill gets amended with a plethora, good vocab word there, of ideas thrown at relating to guns measure, study bill.
relating to firearms.
Done a day before the committee is to take place. Every time. It's the same pattern. So I have a hard time reading an article that then quotes him as saying, it's not my intent to bring something that has no public process. I mean that. It's something that's important to him. Except for the fact that you've done it every year for the 8 years I've been there. Every year.
When it's relating to firearms.
When it's relating to firearms. Every year. It's the same thing. And so what was interesting, I read that chart to you guys, made you guess on the first one and then gave you the answers after that. I should have made you keep guessing. But put that chart out on the floor the other day, gave a little remonstrance about it. And when I got done and I said, is there any way we can come back in 2027 with zero placeholder bills? Literally, he gaffed. He laughed out loud. And he said loud enough for me to hear, that's not going to happen. And Senator Taylor, Labor and Business, has been one to put forward 10, 20 placeholder bills as well. And the reason why the majority party does that is it doesn't require them to then go back and use one of their 5 priority bills.
That is correct.
So we have a bill drafting timeframe that we're allowed to draft. Then we have to drop the bills. And then after a certain deadline, any bill we draft after that is one of 5 priority bills. Now, if you're the chair of the committee, meaning you're in the majority party, you can drop as many bills as you want that have a placeholder.
Or, well, anybody, if you're in the majority party and not even a chair of committee, you can drop as many placeholder bills as you want because it's your own party that's going to come to you and say, hey, I need that relating to clause for this concept, and I'm going to take it. You don't do it as a member of the minority because they will steal them from you and take that. But chairs of committee can also then add, they can have as many committee bills as they want.
Yeah. That's the point I wanted to make. I mean, that is it right there, is that we as members of the minority party would never have a broad relating to bill relating to clause in a bill for fear that someone's going to come along and say, oh my gosh, exactly what I needed was a bill relating to industry so I can regulate industry.
Although I did try to have a bill drafted relating to the universe, but they wouldn't allow me to do it.
You know what, DBS, that doesn't surprise me. Good on you for doing that.
Yep.
So another one, I just want to briefly talk about this. And again, this is a member that has,
Let's name the member.
Figuring out kind of the building writ large. Lisa Reynolds. So she got in trouble here in an article about.
Well, she's been in the building since.
Well, she was in the House.
In the House, yeah.
But a doctor from Portland.
A doctor from Portland put forward a bill that you would argue really does benefit her specifically, and then exempts a powerful special interest. A bill that Nigel Jaquez, wonderful article, May 7th, if you want to read it, who benefits from the bill. And so you can read through the article and see that she most likely should have either gone to the Oregon Ethics Commission or declared a conflict of interest in the process.
Yeah, and I think the latter is the requirement because, you know, we can put in any bill. We're citizen legislators, and, you know, we can put in a bill, a large group or small group, whatever that affects more than us. But anytime it does directly have a potential or an actual conflict of interest, we have to declare it.
Yep.
But I want to ding this one for a couple things. So if you go back to the OPB article, you'll see that this was a gut and stuff.
Oh, you're kidding.
No, this was posted 2 hours last minute prior to committee, this amendment that...
Was it a study bill?
So
Her own bill? She got and stuffed her own bill?
I don't know that. It just says that 2 hours before the hearing, Senate Bill 28, a bill that, as introduced, would order up a simple study on healthcare.
It was a placeholder.
I just don't know if it was hers. Sorry, you asked me if it was
no,
hers.
good point.
We can look it up. Reynolds' last-minute proposal would force private insurance company to pay the doctors the same rate for services, regardless of whether or not they pay or they're part of a hospital system or an independent practice. Now, the distinction here is fascinating, right? So hospitals right now struggling to make a profit, and it's because 70 to 80% of their work is Medicaid, Medicare, which reimburse at about 70% of cost. So you can't make money at 70% of your cost, which means your payer mix has to have enough private insurance people paying in at 135+% of cost to offset the fact that you're not making any money on the Medicaid, Medicare clientele. So as a independent practice, a practitioner gets to decide who they provide service for. And so Senator Hayden had weighed in, raised some interesting points. I will say she's a thoughtful person. She's engaging in this conversation. She's not just dismissing this, saying there's no there. She's considering, yes, I probably should have gone to the Ethics Commission or declared this conflict. But at the same time, she also then considered that Senator Hayden said, well, as a private practitioner, you don't have the same mix of individuals coming to you for service. So if you're 100%, private insurance, you're making money. So to force the same reimbursement rate as the hospitals get, like that's not a fair comparison. And she said, well, out of curiosity, what do you think is fair? And she suggested that maybe they could go to at least 10% of patients that had Medicaid. Hospitals are between 70 and 80%. Like there's a fine line between okay, at 80%, we barely make it. If we went to 81%, we would lose money. And this is a private practitioner saying, I want the same payment that a hospital gets with all their infrastructure and all their overhead and all the considerations of the charity care they provide and the payer mix that they have. I want that benefit, and I'm willing to do it in exchange for maybe bringing in 10% of the 70% reimbursement rate,
which is ridiculous. I mean, my Bay Area hospital in Coos Bay struggling because of the payer mix and so much Medicaid, Medicare payments there because it's just so high that we don't have the private insurance to be able to bump that up and be able to get the reimbursements that we need. It's tragic, and it's something that we've been fighting. This is a ridiculous bill. Have we killed this bill yet?
I don't know the status of the
It
bill.
was
We should find out.
It was Patterson's
It was
legislation
Patterson's bill.
as a placeholder, and she's the chair,
Chair of
Healthcare
Healthcare Committee in the Senate.
in the Senate, and of course Senator Reynolds is on. It is in Ways and Means.
But I will say it's a different response from Reynolds. Reynolds, it gives what I feel is a genuine response.
Indeed.
And I'm not trying to pick on Senator Przansky more than I want to, because his response, though, to say that's bad business, don't do business that way. When you're a repeat offender, does it every year. Every long session, there's a gun bill that gets gut and stuffed at the last minute by Floyd Przansky. I don't understand how he gets away with that quote in a newspaper article where the journalist doesn't say, well, wait a second, sir, you do this every year.
Well, that would require follow-up questions by the media, which isn't always eager to do that. We have baggage. We're Republicans in the state of Oregon. So, and, you and I'm a former leader in the House. You're a current leader, deputy leader in the Senate. And so we know what it's like to have reporters follow up and follow up and follow up. And so when we say, look, you're not treating everyone the same, there's truth to that. Now, that being the case, I served on the Judiciary Committee so far. And Floyd Przansky, senator from Eugene, chair of the Judiciary Committee, is genuinely open to input, at least from me and other committee members, and but the process, except when it comes to those categories, as you said, that's when he has done the gut and stuff, and he, games the process when it comes to firearm bills and other types of stuff. But, I'm also going to say, hey, he's actually run a pretty good committee other than that. And that's the thing, that it's not that anyone is completely one way or the other, is that they make exceptions. They make exceptions for themselves all the time, the majority party, when they're saving the earth or, they're whatever their issue is.
Or saving lives, except for not.
Right. But my argument has always been, you don't get to exempt yourself from process when the virtue, according to you, of your cause merits it. Due process, committee process, public hearings, open public meetings, those apply to the Democratic Party, which runs Oregon, right? So I'm not going to, when someone could say, but what about Alabama? What about Idaho?
Yeah.
We're not in Idaho, right? We're not in Alabama. We're in Oregon. Mm-hmm. Redistricting. I mean, we could go through the list where the Democratic Party, the majority party in Oregon, exempts themselves from following the rules and games the system. They did it the other day with appointing a replacement of a U.S. senator, right? You remember that bill?
Senate Bill 952.
Right. They just do it. And to not call them out, for us to be criticized for calling them out for their inconsistency, if not hypocrisy, is disingenuous. We are to call them out, and we should call them out every time they don't follow the rule of law or the process that's agreed upon.
It's our job and our duty to do that. And how's it go, leader? The job of the majority is to govern, and the job of the minority is to be the majority.
Well, that's
become the majority.
And that's an old saying about, don't get so involved. You got to remember campaigns and stuff. And I get that. But I will say this, when the majority party, without any check and balance, holding every facet of government, judicial branch, all Democratic appointees, and clearly the Court of Appeals, Supreme Court, right? So legislative branch, executive branch, every agency head, every agency sub-levels, right?
'Cause it's been decades, and
it's been
they've
40 years.
They have infiltrated, and you have the nepotism through the agencies where they've been hired here and hired here. Hell, we just had 3 swaps today, and 3 and different agency heads on the
Well,
same
and
floor.
I look at it and I just think, it's not healthy for governance, and which is one of the reasons we wanted to do this podcast, is to be able to say not only has our state government's budget undergone mission creep, but the process. Again, you could say, well, 80% of the time they're following the rules.
Yeah.
Well, that's not good enough.
No, it's not. We've had this debate on elections, right? We've been talking about, okay, we're registering people through DMV. How many people are non-citizens that are getting registered to vote? We brought forward 5 or 6 election bills, and what's been fascinating to me is to listen to Senator Manning serves on the Rules Committee with me. I go down to testify on behalf of my own bills saying, hey, I had a member of my staff that volunteered to be an election observer here in Marion County, and they were put behind a wall. So, David, you stand there. I've got my computer here. There's a wall here. You can't see my computer. You can't see my desk, and I'm over here working away. What value does that bring?
Correct.
That's not an observer. We need to either take this partition down or we need cameras. We need to be able to see.
Well, wasn't
nothing
it
to hide, right? And
Senator-
his response, I want to be clear, his response was, well, I don't have any evidence of that. That's not real. And what I'm really concerned is that the national election was rigged. So to your point about like the rules apply to thee and not to me, like, well, there's nothing to see here. Like another one of my bills was that right now we allow you to mail your ballot in up to 7 days after the election. Yep. Well, the law was vague, and so we'll get to Secretary of State Shemia Fagan here in a second on another topic. But then Secretary of State Shemia Fagan said, by rule, if we receive the ballot and it's got your signature on it, it doesn't need a postmark, we'll accept it. That the attestation on the back is affirming that you did it on time. Well, no, your signature on the back of a document has nothing to do with when you voted, when you sent it,
when did you sign it.
And so, instead of having a deadline, and we all know that, November 5th is election day.
Yep.
Got to have it in by, you can mail it in a couple days later, postmarked, good to go. We've also paid for postage now, so, you don't have to worry about putting a stamp on it. We've made it so easy for people. But in the case that a ballot ends up in the hands of a county clerk and there's no declaration from the Postal Service clearing off the postage, that your signature on the back is enough. So apparently we don't actually have a voting deadline. And again, Senator Manning said, well, I don't have any evidence of this. This is just you talking, and I don't believe this. And so I think we've got the best system ever. There's nothing to see here. We're doing a great job. How dare you question
us? How dare you question
Indeed.
us?
Well, I had an elections omnibus bill that did those things. That also, it also made sure that each one of those, because you have elections boards that are people that come in and help with elections for the counties and so forth. They have to be equal members of the 2 major parties. If you're going to pick up a ballot for ballot boxes, they have to have equal members, so they have to have 1 Republican, 1 Democrat go and pick up the ballots at the ballot drop boxes. There is actually numbers, we found out in Coos County, numbers on the individual ballots or the envelopes that reference your party that we were going to be removing. And then, of course, there was Senate Bill 210 that shut down OLIS.
210 by David Rocksmith broke
OLIS.
the internet.
It did.
It broke the
That
internet.
would, of course, reaffirm. So it was a vote by mail vote to allow Oregonians, because of these changes that the legislature has done, right? Motor voter, you sign up for OHP, you're registered to vote.
So they're not doing that yet.
7 days until we're
After election.
after election day. So since the legislative body has changed vote by mail since we, as Oregonians, passed it via a ballot measure and election. I just wanted to give the individuals, the Oregonians, the opportunity to reaffirm. And oh my goodness, you would think that the world was ending from that. The Democrats turned on their PCP machine, and the irony of it all, of the roughly 15,000 pieces of testimony that was submitted. And then talking to IT, there was more people that signed up to testify on that piece of legislation than all of the bills in the 2024 short session put together.
2025.
The people that signed up to testify for Senate Bill 210.
Submitted testimony.
Well,
not signed.
Or signed up to testify and submitted. But you said 2024, that was a short session.
We're more than all of the bills that came in 2024.
He broke,
okay.
He broke OLIS.
I broke OLIS.
OLIS
The worst
being
part
the
is
legislative internet system.
Oregon Legislative Information System. But the worst part is now it only shows the top 100, so you have to scroll.
Yeah.
Their way of solving this problem so that it didn't have to download all tens of thousands of
now you
comments.
have to hit next.
Now you have to hit next. And so one day I was scrolling through and I could not find my own testimony. I was like, I know I submitted, and it was a bill where I put the LC opinion on the constitutionality of Senate Bill 686, interesting bill that would require Google and Meta to pay $122 million to Oregon's newspapers. Now, how the state should interfere in private business, third party to third party, is beyond me, but they want to do it. And so I had this legal opinion that showed that probably 5 different ways it violates the Oregon Constitution or the U.S. Constitution, and it was problematic. And Chair Jama said he didn't care, despite our oath of office, that it's up for the courts to decide. We're not constitutional attorneys, so we pay for legal staff to draft bills and to give us advice. The legal staff says, hey, that's most likely unconstitutional. And again, I had 5 different provisions. One, they said, yeah, that's most likely. They said one, that's probably. They said, yeah, that could face some scrutiny. And then the other one, they said, yeah, I'm not sure, but that's probably, we should address that if you're going to move forward with the bill. And the 5th one was, yes, that violates, yes. It wasn't even, there was no obfuscation.
Does that come into the floor of the Senate?
It passed out of rules. That's where it is now. It's passed out of rules. So,
well, but and the thing there though is it's once again, it's going to take private business to file the legal action.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to have to spend money to do it.
On lawyers.
These private industries may or may not give to Republican candidates.
Who knows?
And more importantly, the DOJ.
They really don't. I mean, I can answer that question.
Okay, but
Google and Meta don't. They're not big financiers of.
But it's still costing taxpayer dollars because then DOJ has to then go defend it to the tune of what, $300-400 an hour. That
it's going to be significant.
That we're paying those guys over with Dan Rayfield, former Speaker of the House.
Attorney General.
Yep.
What's he doing this week? How many times has he sued Trump and the administration? I'm losing count.
He's leading a law. No, that last week he was leading a lawsuit. This week I think they lost one, or they got one thrown out, if I remember correctly.
Well, we'll see.
I meant to text Dan and give him a frowny face.
I will say at the end of the article, that 686 bill now moves for a Senate vote. Senate President Rob Wagner, a Democrat from Lake Oswego, told reporters Monday he supports the bill, but said the potential legal challenges could slow the bill's momentum. This is his quote. I think that might change a little bit of the conversation. I've never been in a position generally to think that we're going to be using the legislature to pass policy that's going to just test the court. I will say I'm going to probably lose sleep over reading that comment.
If I had $1,
ballot measure 113
right?
was imposed against me very specifically to test the court and the validity of that ballot measure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway.
But how many bills a session? It'd be interesting. We need to figure out How many bills a session do the Democrats move? I know it's more than a handful that literally do that test the Constitution, that we have LC opinion. I mean, we had a piece of legislation here recently that we had an LC opinion, Legislative Council opinion, that it was that it was unconstitutional or illegal or it had problems. But then I want to say, was it Boley or OSHA? OSHA came in and said, well, actually, we'll just ask DOJ because they knew.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was the ag housing rules.
That's what it was.
So Anna Scharf had a legal opinion that said that they had gone beyond the scope of their authority. And very smugly, I might add, the agency came before the subcommittee and said, we're not worried. We're going to get a DOJ opinion, and it's going to affirm that we were right. More offensively, though, if you look in the past, we had a bill specifically designed to give money to black entrepreneurs.
This is
and
coming out of COVID.
we gave $8 million away to black entrepreneurs, only to have a Hispanic woman say, you violated the Constitution.
And we told them that at the time.
We told them that at the time. You're not allowed to do for one group of people what you're
right.
not doing for everybody. That's a violation of the Oregon Constitution. They said, well, whatever. So we got to the end of that, having asked the question, hey, LC, does this violate the Constitution? They said, most likely it does, right? Most likely it does. Depends on how you give the money away. They did the same thing with a bill that gave down payment assistance to non-citizens. We gave $15 million last year away to non-citizens to have down payment assistance. I have a 24 and a 26-year-old that could have used some down payment assistance. Right now, the cost of a house is through the roof. Interest rates are high. The only thing that makes it affordable is down payment assistance. But we gave $15 million away to people that aren't citizens of the United States to make sure that they could buy property.
Well, residents of Oregon, but I will say this: people are getting tired of seeing services to them turned down or thinned down, cut down, with money being given to folks that aren't citizens. And you can argue policy one way or another. In Judiciary Committee, I pointed out we moved a bill to Ways and Means that gave $6 million to attorneys for legal services for undocumented immigrants. And, I said, how can we say yes to this when we don't know what we're saying no to? And, I understand the need for legal services for those who are undocumented. I understand all the arguments. And I'm not denying that there may be some merit in them. What I'm saying is our general fund is under strain.
Yeah.
And when you say no to things that are or to programs and you undercut, when you say, hey, we can't have a DMV office in a rural area anymore because we don't have enough money. And then you're saying yes to those things. People are getting tired of it.
Did that $6 million go to a political for-profit, nonprofit law center like the Oregon Law Center?
Well,
because they're is so bold sometimes that they literally name in statute where and who friends they're paying off.
It would go to nonprofits.
Yeah.
It would go to nonprofits who were providing that services. And one of the reasons they said they needed $6 million is because under the Trump administration, money to nonprofits for legal services to immigrants went down from the Biden administration. So they came to the state and said, you need to backfill. And so again, this is going to happen 100 times over. And people are, especially those in, east of the mountains, are getting tired of seeing their services reduced, and then eventually gone.
Well, you don't even have to go to the east of the mountains. You can just go south of Eugene.
Right.
And it's the same situation.
I would argue you can just get 20 miles off of I-5.
Agreed.
Well, and people, it's not like folks, in our respective districts don't have empathy, but what they're tired of is seeing, the opportunities for their kids reduced. They're tired of seeing services reduced. And all because, this constant refrain coming from the Democratic Party that, well, we just need more money for this, more money for that. And, every time you say, look, when you're saying yes to something appropriated from our tax revenues in the general fund, you're going to say no to something else.
Right.
And we're in a year and the reason we are on this podcast and doing this is because we're taking agency by agency and saying, is Oregon prepared for less money from the federal government due to the national debt load? And so many are saying it's because of Trump. No, it's baked in. We're at $36.8 trillion.
Yeah, I was just about to say, updated debt clock, 36.8.
Yep.
$36.8 trillion. And it's baked in. Now we're going to have a deficit. It's going to add $2 trillion just this year, and every year going forward until we do something.
Well, and when you're looking at, I don't know when we're going to publish that, but the revenue forecast comes out on the 14th.
Next week, yep.
Next week.
May 14th.
This month. But I want to go back to, all of these, these dollars to these political for-profit nonprofits, the environmental for-profit nonprofits. You're in a situation where COVID was worse, right? You had just all of this money. And so challenge Tobias Reed that those audits need to be coming in because not just millions, billions of dollars came in and went out. And I remember having a conversation with our friend Christine Drazen about some of those nonprofits that prior to COVID might have been having a budget of about $100,000 that went to $1 million. And there was people that were, and these political for-profit nonprofits and environmental for-profit nonprofits were paid. And those dollars are going away. And you have people exiting Oregon. And I would like to see Secretary of State Reed make sure and bring accountability to all of the billions of dollars that Oregon had from the federal government that went out to all corners of the state, but a lot of it went to nonprofits, especially in Portland.
We're going to do an entire episode dedicated to that
The
topic.
nonprofit industrial complex.
Sounds like you were signing up.
I am in.
So I do want to go back. So, Mike, you were talking about like Oregonians have sympathy, right? Like
Empathy. Compassion.
They care about people.
They do.
So when you talk about something like sanctuary state, I think there's a fundamental draw to say, well, yeah, if there's somebody from a part of the world that's being prosecuted, they should be able to come here, right? If they're being persecuted for their religious freedom, like if they're in harm's way because of where they live, we want to be a place that's welcoming. Right, like I think generally, fundamentally,
think
people. But then this week, hold on, this week we get a guy that's arrested, 36-year-old cartel traffic ringleader.
Yep.
79 pounds of methamphetamine, 4.2 million fentanyl-laced pills, about 4.5 million in cash, 4.5 kilograms of heroin, 7.5 kilograms of cocaine, 11.5 kilograms of fentanyl powder, and about 41 weapons, 7 vehicles, jewelry. Valued at $50,000, high-end vehicles. Like, this is who we're attracting. So you can have compassion. You could want to help people. But when your laws allow for a trafficker of humans, I guarantee we find out more about this guy. This guy's sex trafficking people. He's human trafficking people.
Not a doubt.
He's trafficking drugs. This is an organized crime ring that's property crime in your area has gone up because these people exist. Like, everything about this is something that the state of Oregon wants to reject. And I am curious how many people associate it back to the fundamental underlying policies that allow him to have existed here for as long as he was able to get away with it.
Well, I often think that, if you have a parameter, right, and you're moving this scale and you're saying, look, we don't want that, so we're going to move it this way. And what's happened is, if the line is moved such that somebody with a story that everyone's empathy is impacted to say, oh my gosh, this happened to this woman with 2 kids, or this happened to this family, and et cetera. And then they set legislation based upon that. And the fact that there is, therefore, because the law is not perfect, it's a set process and rules, therefore, people taking advantage of that. And people like this guy. And after a while, you start to say, wait a second, we've got to focus down our spending. We've got to focus down some of these laws. We got to focus down these programs. And then you get the constant, but what about this? But what about this, the mom of 2 kids who came from the, and it's like, look, do we have the ability now as a state to continue to legislate and spend based upon that one story retold? And what I am saying is, look, whatever's happened, we're here now, and you can't kick the can down the road. We're out of road. And the more we continue to have a system, a government without any accountability, other than the extreme example like ex-Secretary of State Shemia Fagan or et cetera, right? Without vetting, without public meetings, where, you start to say we're not going to change the trajectory, and the path we're on is not sustainable. But to ask the hard questions is to make people uncomfortable. But I didn't come here for the status quo.
No.
Our grandkids can't afford the status quo.
Well, and when it comes to something like this, I mean, having been involved in the cartel and human trafficking stuff down in Southern Oregon, and I put forth, it was in your Judiciary Committee, Senate Bill 1056, that would have created a drug enforcement, human trafficking, and MMIP division within Oregon State Police. $5.85 million per the biennium, 10 dedicated OSP troopers, 2 dedicated resource specialists with DOJ, so that we can dive into the cartel grows, dive into the cartel drug trafficking. Because in my district, we have 2 of the essentially 3 ways that you, or more, but you get drugs into the state, which is 101 and I-5, right?
Or 97.
In 97 through the central part of Oregon. But you're in a situation where, is it going to take, as you were mentioning, because that bill's dead. I mean, with this, the largest drug bust in U.S. history, the guy living in the capital city of Oregon, Salem, right down the street from where we are today. And do I drop the bill as a priority bill and try to push it to try to get it done now? I mean, you
have chamber deadlines.
All I wanted to do was get it down to Ways and Means to continue that conversation of how critically important, because you're right with the human trafficking. There's not a doubt that is occurring. I mean, when it comes to empathy, when it comes to compassion for individuals, that in itself, literally these people are looking for work. They are tricked into getting into the truck or the van. They are then blindfolded and taken to a place and forced to live in squalor. Their restroom facilities are a 5-gallon bucket. They're sleeping on a cardboard under a tarp, and they're forced to work, or these cartel members will go after their family that is wherever they are, and that's what they'll do.
So, David, do you think the sanctuary state current laws prevent that crackdown, or do you think it's that culture of we're a sanctuary state and anything the feds do we're against? I mean, what's led to that?
Well,
why is Oregon a place where that occurs?
Well, it is our sanctuary state status, but it's also still the remnants of Measure 110, right? That allowed for, illegal drugs in this state that they didn't have to worry about it. And so, but our sanctuary status, the pushback against ICE is a huge problem in this state. I'm to be honest with you, I'm surprised that the arrests happened as many as they did in Salem, considering that.
Yeah.
I really am. But I'm really happy that it did. And we haven't heard a peep about that, have we? Because it was such. Now, if this was
Well, the feds arrested him, right?
Yeah.
correct,
Yeah, but to think that guy, which you just described, lived here, and it would be against the law for the city of Salem or the sheriff's department of Marin County or the state troopers to assist in any way in arresting that guy
essentially,
or providing information on that guy.
essentially, yes.
And, I look back to the days when Portland was in, this, defunding police, Measure 110, and, how was it compassionate to let some guy just waste away on drugs laying on the street in Portland? How is that compassionate?
Right.
It isn't.
Yeah, it's not.
But I do want to bring up one thing when it comes to illegal immigrants in the state and so forth. I do have some compassion for those individuals, especially our migrant farm workers.
Yep.
That are out there busting their rears in every single day, and I really think that it is a message. It is not just a message, but it is a commitment that I have to try to figure out how we can make sure that type of work continues in Oregon, right? Because the pears and Medford, right, still need to be harvested, just like the apples in Hood River.
And the pears in Hood River.
Well, I was trying to give a shout out to.
Well, and we're
Chuck
not
Johnson.
talking. I mean, and there are refugees seeking, safe haven, and again, we're not, denouncing a system of the U.S. embracing refugees, et cetera. What we're talking about are horrible practices that are taking advantage of those laws.
Right.
But to that end, though, I mean, we have a housing crisis in this state, and there was a article on Fox 12 Oregon, just on the 5th, titled "New Affordable Housing Complex in Salem Designed for Foreign Refugees."
Right.
And so once again, we are setting things up for a certain class of individuals. Celebration of Cell Blossom Gardens, new community reporting offers 90 living units with certain amounts set aside for refugees. Salem for refugees. So, I can understand as you started this segment, we're talking about individuals that are running away from, just
Religious oppression.
religious
political
oppression. It could be a number of different things, right? But at what point, when we've talked about the budget on Oregon D.O.G.E here before, when we've talked, we cannot be all things to everyone.
Well, and I think that's the point. I mean, part of, again, the culture in Salem, in the political environment, in the legislature, when I say culture in Salem, what I mean is in the state capitol and the legislative branch, is that to question the sanctuary state status like you did today, Leader Bonham, to basically say these things aren't working, to question it gets rebuke and almost a denouncement. Mm-hmm. And what we're trying to do is to question everything. And we're not saying get rid of everything. but we're questioning everything. And if you don't have the right questions, you can't get to the right answers. And whether people want to face it or not, the amount of federal money, net of inflation, that's coming to this state and all states in the next 5 to 10 years is going down.
Yeah.
It is.
And we have to get our house in order. We have to realize our general fund was overextended. We have to question everything. We have to question the sanctuary state status.
Yeah.
Not that we say, hey, we're getting rid of everything, but we have to look at everything. And when we have guys like you've mentioned living here under protections, and you have to say, that's not acceptable.
Right.
And so to question it immediately gets you taken by the Democratic senators and reps to the other side, the extreme example. Oh, so you want to throw out, the single mom with 2 kids fleeing oppression. It's like, no, stop it.
Yeah.
Stop the disingenuous
Every
arguments.
time. Yeah.
Stop it. Because this is real. The storm has begun. It's not going away. We've got to get our government back on its core mission. And we have to make sure Oregon is still a state where somebody succeeds or fails on their own merits with equal opportunity, and no area of the state gets left behind. That hasn't been the theme of our government.
Well, it's not the theme of this session, right? So we know that's where we are. We know that's the reality of today. And again, within the context and framework of talking about being a sanctuary state and a migrant population, workforce-wise, we could not sustain harvest east of the Cascades in my district, even in East Clackamas, East Multnomah County. Without a migrant workforce, we wouldn't have farms today. I'm not sure that we would have rural health care. The amount of non-citizens that are engaged in nursing activity, the certified nurses assistants, the folks that are engaged in that work as well are necessary. And yet here's the thing, we're a nation of laws. We've got to figure out a way to live within consideration of a legal framework, because otherwise, who's going to obey any law?
Well, and the federal government is in charge of immigration, not us.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, I would like to see on the West Coast, and I've talked about this as the delegate to PNWER, Pacific Northwest Economic Region, which is the northwestern states and Canada's western provinces, the opportunity to look at a West Coast visa program, right, to where you can migrate up because those same migrant farm workers that are working in California and working those fields that are coming up and working the pairs in Medford at Harry and David are working the pairs in Hood River, and then they're going into Washington, and then they're going into Canada through the season. It's critically important work.
I just keep thinking if we could figure out a way to have the employer sponsor, because it is the same people that come back every year.
Exactly.
Right?
Well,
much like the H-2A, H-2B programs that are out there, the work visa programs, like you have the same families that come back every year. And then again, you've got to have a border process where you don't militarize it. And again, now here we are talking federal policy.
It's federal.
But bring it back to the state of Oregon, and the problem gets exacerbated because you say, okay, well, we want to provide services to these people as well because we are compassionate people. Mm-hmm. But we started with, let's cover all kids. Let's make sure they have health care. Mm-hmm. Like anybody under the age of 7, we got to make sure we cover, right? Okay. And then we say, well, let's cover all people. Let's bring in. We extended the kids up to 18, and then we said, well, let's bring in the 18 to 55 year olds, and then we said, well, now like anybody that's here in Oregon should have
the
access
number.
to health care.
Was it 100?
It was
21.
When we did cover all people, it was $100 million in 2021, and now 4 years later, it is just under $1 billion.
It is insane. This is how we cannot be everything to everyone.
Well, and again, it comes down to choices that you make, and one of the things that I keep, the drum I keep beating is we should be able to question everything. Is this being efficient? Like you did today with Oregon sanctuary state status. We're not saying, hey, get rid of it. There may those who want to argue that, but questioning it we need to question the voice of dissent, the voice of the minority, to question the action of the majority is an absolutely healthy and needed process. And whether it's the sanctuary state, which others have, whether it's general fund spending, because when you make the choice to say we're going to put everyone on Medicaid without federal reimbursement, all right,
Yeah.
there's financial consequences for it. And so you can talk about, hey, Oregon needs to be welcoming and et cetera. And I'm not arguing against that, but I'm arguing like, all right, now that we're in this season of federal contraction and Oregon now has more and more demands on its general fund budget, we need to make hard decisions. And so these programs, every single one of them should be reviewed. Is it working? How does it work better? And do we have the capacity, the bandwidth, in essence, for the next 5 years, 10 years, whatever, to continue to provide, as you mentioned, all things to all people? But my frustration is that if we don't have the ability to even ask those questions, to question the majority, to question those in power, you will not have a healthy system.
Well, and I'm here to tell you that I fully look forward to working with both of you on those very things on the full Ways and Means Committee in the next 54 days of this legislative session.
There are going to be a lot of decisions.
Budgets are priorities, and there's, I don't know how many policy bills down there tied to money.
Yeah.
And we're going to be having those talks.
Hundreds, 300 plus policy bills.
There's 300 plus policy bills
that have been sent to Ways and Means with about $2 billion worth of asks.
Yep. And we have less than one.
So I know we need to wrap up. I got a bunch of other stuff. I was going to get into cranes and how few cranes there are anymore. We used to have 30 plus cranes in the Portland area building stuff. Now we're down to 5. But I want to talk about this one because we've been talking a lot about double standards and different approaches. And former Secretary of State Shemia Fagan, people will remember that she resigned in disgrace, and she had been receiving a $10,000 a month side job reimbursement for giving advice to a group, LaMota, who had been giving people cash contributions beyond a legal limit and all sorts of
I believe that there were some Democrats that are still sitting, members that received those bags of cash.
So this Friday, she's going to be before the Ethics Commission, and the proposal is that she will face a $1,600 fine.
Ooh.
Imagine for half a second, that's me. What do you think that fine would be?
Well, I think it'd probably be, depending on
how many months did you make the $10,000?
Exactly.
How much of that can we get back from you? What did you take from?
Yeah.
Like, this would have been disastrous for me. And I don't mean to insult anybody serving on the ethics committee, but that's my take.
That's what's recommended to the committee. Obviously, the commission has to make its decision, but
and there are people I absolutely respect on the commission.
Sure.
And yet I'm just looking at this saying this is laughable. $1,600, she gets to go back to being an attorney.
Well, and my understanding is she's going to petition the Oregon State Bar to get her law license back.
Well, yeah, that's a process, and I don't know the facts. I don't have any. I'm not in the loop on that. And the bar's going to make their decision. Ethics Commission will make their decision. But I don't. I think we're all disappointed in her. And but one thing, I don't know what the investigation from the Ethics Commission, their investigator came up with. But it does seem pretty light. But at the end of the day, I guess we'll see what they decide.
So I will never forget when Timber Unity was at the Capitol, and the trucks were, I
remember that.
Oregonians were spending their own money while losing money, and the trucks were at the running around the Capitol, and she was a chair of a committee. And my former colleague and Senator Senator Hurt, was set down to testify for a bill, and the comments and disdain for those timber unity individuals, and I recommend you all go look up the hearing, because her public comments of the disdain of those individuals made me really never ever want to speak to her again, because she was just so wretched of a person to those citizens that were literally there trying to save their livelihoods. And it was just absolutely horrible.
I think that was 2019 during the long session.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, we're here. We got 54 more days
Yep.
until the session's out. At some point, we'll talk about bills that, bills that were a reality check, crazy bills.
What'd you have over there?
Well, I mean,
You got a reality check?
Well,
it's
just,
not mine, is it?
No, it's.
Oh, okay.
I thought we were going to get in it, but this is House Bill 3365 that would require that climate change be taught in all disciplines.
That has a public hearing in education this week.
Does it really?
Yeah.
Well,
See, that's the benefit of reading every bill in every committee every weekend, because I know this bill.
All right. So it has a hearing. This is what the bill would do. It would be academic content standards shall include an interdisciplinary approach, which means cross curricula.
Yep.
To sustainability and climate change across all subjects for which academic content standards are established and must be designed.
It was amended. Is that the -A?
No.
Okay. It was amended in the House. I put it on my weekly bills of concern list to get people engaged in testimony in Senate education.
I had a public hearing today.
Is that when
Yeah, it was today.
It was today.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that at least was in the original is that it was a requirement that in schools. So it's reading, it's arithmetic, obviously science, language arts. Everything would have to have climate change discussions. But one of the things that they would do is facilitate discussion about the economic and political factors contributing to climate change. Economic and political factors. So our kids, it would be mandatory teaching about obviously things that I just would like.
But I'm glad you flagged it though, because like right now on OLA's, 180 people have testified.
Right.
Only 50 in opposition. I don't think that this is a 70-30 issue of people that support it. I think this is a 70-30 issue of people that were driven through a grassroots effort to come and testify.
Yep.
And I bet you most people back home and all the people watching this wonderful podcast take a moment to submit testimony. You get 2 days. Hopefully we can get this episode up because we got a work session that'll come up too. But people, I'm sure, do not want this taking up bandwidth in
For
helping
math,
their kids.
reading.
Right. In our school performances, are not stellar.
No, we're in last place
Right.
across the board.
And so to have and to say, look, you're mandating, the legislature would mandate to a local school district, you must teach this, and across all curricula. So in other words, math, 2 + 2 is 4, and climate change is bad, and it's killing all you kids. So, in other words, it's like, what are you going to do? You're going to teach third graders? You're going to teach fifth, seventh? What are you going to do across all curricula? We're not talking limited to science. And to facilitate political discussions in public schools.
I got a good bill for you. If that we can pull to the floor. If this makes it to the floor, I would like to pull a bill to the floor that would also mandate in our middle schools the human life cycle from conception to birth, because that is actual data, factual information that they refuse to have a hearing on. But we're going to go ahead and mandate this.
I just like the idea of a question that's like, hey, little Jimmy, what's the global emissions impact if we outsource our concrete production from Baker City when we shut down that plant
There
to
you go.
China
Yeah.
and have to ship it clear back across the Pacific Ocean? Like what? And then
Calculate
maybe
the carbon footprint.
Well,
again,
you know, we can always thank Richard Whitman, director of DEQ, when asked if Oregon was go to carbon or emission zero tomorrow, what impact would that have on the global emissions? And he said that it would be imperceptible.
And I raise this because I'm like, given our budget problems, given all the other things, and we've discussed on this podcast, we've gone through agencies, not all of them, but many of them talk about the waste, the spending here, the increase. And then we're in this storm that's hitting us, and the budget and all these things have come back to roost, so to speak,
Whose
and
bill is this? Let me
livability.
look at it.
And this is the bill. This is the bill. We're going to, across curricula, not just science, reading, language. I mean, this is the stuff that I just say, you know what? Iceberg dead ahead. Turn the ship.
But I will say selfishly, and we've been naming people tonight willy-nilly here on the old podcast, but to see Senator Meek's name on this is delightful. I don't believe the people of Oregon City and Happy Valley would support this. I just don't think they want us investing time in this.
Is he on it right now? I didn't
And
get
so
on the
we've got elections coming up, and people are signing on to some crazy bills.
Hopefully Senator Golden puts his name on this too.
I'm just saying, but these are some ideas that are not mainstream. These are not popular ideas. People are not begging for this at home, saying,
No.
"Please, God, indoctrinate
They're
my
begging
kids
for
more."
affordability. They're begging
Right.
for affordability.
How does my kid
for
buy
their
a house?
utilities? They're begging for affordability for eggs. I mean, they're literally begging for affordability.
I just see this, and the reason I brought it up because, iceberg dead ahead. It's like in the midst of that, they're like, wait a second, we need to, I'm just like, no, because we have to get back to our core functions. And you know what? If a school district wants to teach about climate change, they probably do in science.
But this is DeSantis's DEI. I remember Ron DeSantis running for president said DEI stood for division, exclusion, and indoctrination.
Yep.
Like all this does is create conflict.
And what teacher and who gets to decide what's political? And what teacher gets to talk to, our grandkids and tell them the political and economic, right?
Well, no, and that's just it. But see, what's going to happen as a former school board member? What's going to happen is you're going to have
The glasses.
I'm bringing them on.
Oh, you're gonna have school districts in my district that are going to be very different. You have our good friend and colleague Dr. Noah Robinson.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Who is
Does homeschool curriculum.
well, not only that, but he has a PhD in physics. No, chemistry. And so he had a conversation about this, which I'm sure he was just aghast because he's on the Senate Education Committee today.
Literally every day on the floor when he gives a remonstrance, I shouldn't say every day, every other day, he's talking about the effects of carbon in the world.
Yeah.
And I have not heard him mention negative effects yet.
None, because they are all factual, scientifically proven information that has been backed up by scientific research. Literally, he's not wrong. The world is greener today than it was 50 years ago because there is more carbon and the plants are growing faster.
I had an interesting conversation today. I was talking to a representative from one of the investor-owned utilities, and I was asking this question. I said, just straight up, like, let's talk climate change. Like, where do you think we're going? What do you think? And of course, the acknowledgement was there that we have a bill too about the requirement that if we're going to outsource minerals, raw materials that are potentially harmful that it's not through child labor.
Oh yeah, we have that bill coming up this week too.
Yeah. So a really good bill. It's coming to labor and business. It's Republican sponsored. That's just like, hey, if we're going to talk about ethics, if we're going to talk about morality, if we're going to talk about the climate, then we shouldn't do this to the kids that are having to go harvest it.
Yeah.
So
it's the fact that Democrats, the majority party in this state, they're like the NIMBYs, right? Not as long as it's not in my backyard. But if it's happening in this third world country where they're literally killing kids, we don't care. As long as we get our lithium, as long as we get what we need to continue with our narrative, and that's what this bill is aimed to reach.
we have massive mineral deposits in your district.
Oh, we do, and in mine, and in Noah's
that we're saying, whoa. It's okay if you do this over in Africa, but don't you dare do this in Southeast Oregon. And then we do have windmills that the blades are getting to the end of their age. What do you do with those? Now, it's neat that the tower can receive replacement blades, that you can take the blade, but what do you do with these 100-foot plus long blades? What do you do with them?
I was talking to somebody, Vestas.
Can we turn them into affordable housing?
Unfortunately not, but well, kind of, I guess. Vestas has one facility in, I believe it's New York, that turns them into concrete.
And at what
grinds
expense?
them up. Exactly.
So we got to put them on a truck. We got to ship them across country. There goes the carbon footprint of the benefits of.
And you want to talk about the leakage when it comes to the lithium deposits that are in your district, right? That are some of the largest in the United States. And yet you have the same environmental for profit nonprofits that are pushing that bill and that narrative are the ones fighting the ability to access domestic lithium to be able to produce the very batteries that they want people to use for cars and for storage and for all of the things. And yet they are okay with that being mined halfway around the world. And the carbon intensity, because they don't have the environmental laws for that. They don't have the human decency laws and others. They don't care. It's ridiculous.
Well, lively, robust debate.
54 days until people are free. And our pocketbooks are secure.
Give me a little insight into the whiteboard in the Senate Republican Caucus. There is a countdown that says what, Leader Bonham?
54 days until Oregonians are safe from the Oregon Legislature.
That is correct.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for the discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.